Hello and welcome to the UK. I'm Carla Bettles and I'm from the Energy Room in Cambridge. I've been working with a hunter for about 3 years. Specifically, I use the Metatron software and I do therapy sessions and training. This is my second live session. I'm still a little bit nervous, but I'm sure we'll get there in the end. So the format of my live sessions is one, what's on my mind, then telling you some of the successes I've had and answering some questions. So what's on my mind? The last couple of weeks, I've been thinking a lot about how ill health is related to imbalance in our lives. So last time I talked a lot about noticing how there is imbalance in energy in our lives. And unfortunately, in certain situations, no matter how many therapy sessions we're doing, whether it's a hunter or something else, we're just not seeing the results that we want to create. And unfortunately, this can be linked to things that are going on in our lives, the real root causes. So things that bring us stress, like relationships, the environment, our lifestyle, things that are going on day to day, like diet, habits, physical exercise. And if I asked you, what are the top 5 things that you would change about your life? Think about how are they affecting your health, and specifically, how are they affecting your stresses? So I've written down some of the things that I was thinking of, some changes that maybe people would like to make in their lives. Certainly some of them I would like to make in my life. Spend more time with friends and family, building relationships, or letting people into our lives, maybe letting go of unhealthy relationships in our lives, finding harmony about things that have happened in the past or situations that are ongoing now that really are causing us a lot of stress. Changing things that are day to day, so things like our habits. I mean, smoking, drinking, they're kind of obvious ones. Our diet, what are we doing with our diet? Are we doing meal planning? Are we doing supplements that may or may not be bad or good? Physical exercise, are we getting enough physical exercise? All those types of things. And then also changing our environment. So is our home environment healthy and relaxed and the one we want to be living in? Are we happy in our workplace, in the community that we live in? And also, are we following our heart in our day-to-day decisions, what we want to be doing with our lives? I think all of these things really affect our energy of who we are as a person. And when things are going well, or we're content and happy and things are harmonious, then don't we always feel so much better in ourselves? And if situations are pressuring us, then every little thing can become difficult, and particularly around sleep. If we don't get a good night's sleep, that really affects our health and long term can cause a lot of problems. So by not making these changes, how are they impacting our lives, and how could they impact our lives and our health if we did make these changes? It's not always easy, but is it worth it in the end? And I really do think, again, that harmony and balance are so important in our day-to-day health, and long-term not having harmony and balance can cause chronic conditions. And unfortunately, the best result, certainly in my life, the best result I've had is when I've been through a lot of challenging experiences or made some tough decisions or done something that's, it's not been easy to do, but that's when I've had the biggest reward. So thinking about challenges, moving on to success stories. I want to tell you about a friend of mine. She's a lovely lady, and I didn't know her that well. Her daughter goes to a group that my daughter goes to, and we started chatting, and over time, and she was telling me about her husband who has been quite poorly, and I guess at the time I was a bit nervous about telling her about energy healing and things I do with the hunter, but then over time her husband deteriorated quite a lot, and he ended up in hospital, and then she said that he wasn't able to get up and walk around for quite a long time. I remember her saying could people help him out with lifts and things like that, because he was just bedbound all the time. And then it came that he had to have a back operation, and unfortunately this was his second back operation. It was very serious, and I said to her, I do this therapy, why don't you give me his fingernails, and let me see if I can help. And I'm not sure how confident she was, but anyway, she got his fingernails to me on the day of his operation. And I sat down in the evening to do the session, and I messaged her and said, look, I'm doing the session now. And she said, oh, John's just preparing to go in the ambulance to move hospitals for his operation. Can't remember if they were doing it that evening or the morning, so it was all very time critical. And anyway, so I scanned him, and there were problems in his back. He actually had an infection in part of his vertebrae, and I did the usual therapy that I do. I followed all my steps of deal with the infection, then apply healing to all the individual elements, and overall I also saw that he had a really significant chest infection in his lungs, so I dealt with that as well. And I messaged her, and I showed her the screenshots of what I was doing, and that was it. And I didn't really expect a lot more, because obviously they were in crisis, going through hospital visits and stuff. And then about a week later, I got a message from John saying, I want to tell you about what happened. You have changed my life. And then I spoke to him on the phone, and it was just incredible. So he said, as he was coming out of the hospital on the gurney and going into the ambulance, he said, as he hit the fresh air, and this must have been around the time that I cleared his lungs with the infection that was going on, he said he drew breath like this, and he said it was like eating 10 packets of tunes at once, and he felt like he could breathe for the first time in a very long time, and he had this beautiful breath of fresh air. And then he obviously went to the hospital and had his operation, and he said the reduction in pain has been absolutely incredible. And after his operation, he had the nurse come out and visit him and help him with some of his exercises, and he said what he was able to do was way beyond anything that he'd been able to do after the first operation. He had the same operation twice. And he was kneeling down, he was able to walk around. And when he sent me his original message, he put at the bottom, and I have sent this message standing up. And it was literally only a few days after this operation. And he said he was expecting him to be in such considerable pain, and it had just dropped. Obviously, he had some pain from the operation, but he wasn't expecting all his pain to go. He had such chronic pain all through his nerves, all down his spine and his legs and everywhere. And he said, I know that it was your therapy session that made this difference. He said, yes, the operation helped, and he needed that physical change with his operation, but it was the hunter that brought about the biggest change. And he said in his breathing, he's had problems with his breathing since he was a teenager, and he said it's like finally being able to breathe for the first time in years and years. So what an absolutely incredible story that is, and I feel absolutely privileged to be able to have given that to him, and for him to have shared those results with me. So if you're listening, John, thank you. I really treasure that session. But I want to tell you about my own experience, because my very first session I ever did with the Hunter, which actually wasn't using the Metapathia software, because I didn't know how to work that, as many people don't when you first get the Hunter. I was using the other one, the Vector, and I did the nerves on my back, and I have chronic back pain, or I used to have chronic back pain all the time. I had very lots of sleepless nights because I was always in pain. I was having to move in bed all the time. I was just never out of pain with my back. And I was sitting with my mum and my uncle, and we were all just watching this screen on my bed. And I was wearing the headphones, and I did the therapy, just plain metatherapy on the nerves in my back. And I suddenly said, my back pain's gone. And I think everyone, particularly my mum, was in so much shock. It's like, wow. And yes, and over the time where I did learn to use the Hunter and not just the Vector, and I've worked on my back, and I can't tell you how different my life is, because I'm getting better night's sleep. If I get problems in my back, I can deal with them on the Hunter. And I think my body, and lots of people say this, after doing sessions with the Hunter, my body is learning to deal with it better in the future. So if I have something that knocks my back out, and that's quite easy because I'm hypermobile, my body can recover more quickly because it's learnt through the Hunter how to heal itself. So brilliant. So just thinking about backs, because I have a lot of successes with backache, I just wanted to go through the steps that I do with backs. So first of all, I look at the whole spine and I identify which areas are the problem. Then I look specifically at the medial sagittal section of whichever part of the vertebrae I need to look at, both the left and the right side. And I look at the individual elements. So I'm looking at the cartilage, the bone, but also the spinal cord and the tendon. The spinal cord, I had a lady once who had a lot of backache, and when I looked at her medial sagittal section, her spinal cord had a lot of low energy, and she'd had, and this was a long time previously, it was about 8 years beforehand, when she gave birth to her daughter, she'd had a lot of lumbar punctures, and there was a problem with the nurse, and she couldn't find the right position. But anyway, she had a very unfortunate experience around this lumbar puncture, and I was able to go in and help her with that. And she wasn't really even aware that those lumbar punctures might have affected her spine and could have been causing her backache. And I also want to mention about the tendon. So the tendon isn't necessarily obvious on the spine. So you've got to go in that median section. And if you use the magnifying glass on the very edge of the spine, you'll see it's got the tendon, or the ligament rather, I think it's a ligament, and often those points will be low energy, and I would recommend putting in extra points and going into that specifically and healing the ligament there. A lot of backache is actually just from that ligament in my experience. Of course, you want to look for infection, like my friend's husband had an infection in his back. It is quite rare to see infections in backs, but definitely worth looking for. And it takes a second. I'm just having a look here. Yes, so then once I've worked out what's going on, I count the vertebrae and I go into that individual vertebrae, or probably more than one, and see, yes, so like the first lumbar vertebrae or whatever it's called, and you can see all the individual elements of that vertebrae, and I go in and I treat, I will go in and specifically treat each particular element, and then do the whole thing from the top. And then when I go into the medial section, I'm doing each individual element and then doing the whole thing together. And then once I've done those, I would go into the spinal cord nerves, the nerves at the back, and the lumbosacral nerves if it's the lower spine. Yes, so that's backs. It'll be lovely to hear your success stories if you'd like to send them to me, and I'd be very happy to read them out. I think all of us love to hear them. Okay, so questions. I've had a couple of questions posted. Thank you very much. The first one is from Pauline. Hi, Pauline. And she says, having identified many toxins in one organ, can you get rid of them using the reprinter, for instance? Do you think that sometimes the energy is just so low that lots of things show up that aren't actually true? Good question. So I want to remind you about these lists. So the list that I look at for toxins is all toxins. And first of all, when you go into the all toxins list, most of the things in there are black. Anything under or 0.7 or under, the CSS value of 0.7 or under is red. Anything of 0.425 or less is a deep red. And it's those deep reds which are the immediates, and the brighter reds I would also look at. But specifically the deep reds would be the immediate situation. So the way the lists work is it's comparing the energy pattern in the database to your energy pattern or your client's energy pattern, and it really is for your interpretation. I just want to quote what it puts. So if you read on Etalon description on any toxin, it says, denotes an energetic or unconscious reaction, can show exposure, excess, or imbalance with respect to this matter, pathogen, or toxin. So I want to say again, it says can show exposure. So it's really open to your interpretation. So if, for example, I've wrote down a couple of examples here. So sugar toxins, gluten, chlorine, parasites, alcohol, heavy metals, right? So I would look at that person and find out what's going on in their lives that would give you this list as their top toxins. I wouldn't ever say it's absolutely definite and true, because it is a comparison on a database. So only you or that person is going to know whether it is really true or not. I'd say it's a really good indication, and certainly I found them reasonably accurate, although not 100%. So the other part of the question was, do you think, yes, so can you get rid of them using the reprinter, for instance? Now, mostly no, I would say. So when I'm looking at those, sugar toxins, gluten, alcohol, well, those are all diet. So even if I inverted them and reprinted them back to the body, it's not going to solve the problem, because the problem is what's the diet of that person. So is that person having those things in excess? And I'm saying excess for that person in their situation. So as the second part of the question was saying, you know, sometimes we're just so low that lots of things show up. And I think that is so true, that if you are in a bad place, not necessarily physically, but if your body's not feeling that great, you are going to show a lot more intolerances or things that are coming up in your all toxins. So if you're not feeling well, then don't drink alcohol, don't have loads of gluten, don't fill your body with sugar. When you're feeling a lot better, then you'll be able to cope with those, and I bet they wouldn't come up on the list. So another things, so things like chlorine, heavy metals, parasites, they're probably not things that you can just invert the energy and send it back and they'll be cured. I mean, certainly parasites, for example, you'll need to go in and deal with the individual parasites, definitely. Chlorine, that's a difficult one because it's in our water, and swimming pools, etc. So you might invert the energy to help the body deal with it, but I think really what you need to do with the chlorine and probably the heavy metals is to support the body to get better, to cope with it. So for all of these things, I would lower the exposure to those toxins and then support the liver, the intestines, the gallbladder, the pancreas, the heart, all the different parts of the body that are going to support the body getting rid of toxins and general good health. And there are other things that you can do with heavy metals, definitely, that will help you cleanse those. So I think that's quite a good general list of things that do come up. So I think I've covered the question. Thank you, Pauline. I appreciated that. Good question. Next question is from John. Let me read that. So he's said, how do you use the graphs? Good question. And 2, reprinter, is it as good as metatherapy? Also a good question. So let's start with the graphs. So I would absolutely love to sit down and talk to the designer in my own language, obviously, about how this software works. I think that the graphs give a really good indication of how the software works. So when you're looking at, for example, the organopreparations list, and you're looking on the graph and you can see the blue and the red line, which is showing you the ideal energy for that particular organ, and then your own energy is showing in, say, yellow and purple, and you can see how the top of the list, the ideal energy is close to your energy pattern. And then towards the bottom of the list, if there's something, the organopreparations, that is a bit out, then you can see on the graphs that clearly the ideal energy is a long way from your personal energy pattern. Other ways that you're supposed to be able to use these graphs was interpreting whether something is an acute or a chronic condition. And also the position of the peaks and troughs on the graph as to which system of the body the condition is affecting. I think all these things definitely indicate how it works. But for me personally, I haven't found the graphs useful at all. I have spent a lot of time trying to understand people's explanations and going through the manual. I've compared clients that have cancer, whether it's coming up as an acute or a chronic condition. I've compared also. I've spent a long time looking at this, and personally for me, I've never found anything useful that I would use in practice in my day-to-day hunter sessions. So I'm sorry, it's probably not the answer you wanted. If anyone knows, I'd be very interested to hear them, and maybe we could do an interview or something like that. Yeah, good question. My question too. Okay, the second question for you was the reprinter. Is it as good as metatherapy? Just a minute. Just a minute, darling. I'm just recording. Okay. Okay, darling. Okay. Thank you. Bye. Right. Sorry about that. So back again. Is the reprinter as good as the metatherapy? So let's think about how the metatherapy and the reprinter work. So the reprinter is for the whole body, whereas metatherapy is very location specific. And the reprinter is quick because you look at the list, you find the elements that you're interested in. Whereas with the metatherapy, you're really reliant on your own skill level as to be able to find the specific pathogen or area of distress and deal with it. So let's think about pathogens, infections, bacterial infections, viruses, parasites. Do I think that the reprinter is as effective as the metatherapy? In my experience, absolutely yes. I have quite a few people I know now who feel all their sessions, and a lot of people where I clear an infection and they've just gone, oh, the pain just goes, or they can suddenly breathe, something like that. And I get just as many results using the metatherapy to combat the infections as I do the inverse reprint on the list. They each have their own qualities. So using the reprinter, because it is dealing with the whole body. So if you were, for example, going to put E. coli on an inverse reprint, you would be dealing with E. coli across your body. You wouldn't necessarily, sorry, the cat, come in. You wouldn't necessarily want to deal with all things across your body, but in the main, sorry, the cat's really vocal today. What is it? Oh, he's soaking. It's really raining outside. Come here. Come here. Right. Where was I? So, yes, back to pathogens as a whole. So, things that are useful with pathogens. So, when you're looking at the list, you can come on then, off you go. Live sessions, don't you love them? When you're looking at the pathogens for the reprinting, it's really easy because you've got the list and you don't have to get it under 1.2 for it to highlight and for the button to come up. So if you're looking at something and you think, actually, look, it's 2.0 or something that's quite close to 1.2, yes, I think it's relevant. You can inverse reprint it and reprint it straight away. I know there is a way also to do that with the metapathia, but you can't always find what you're looking for very easily. And the other thing this is what the point I was trying to make earlier. Let's say you had E. coli in your body, you can deal with it in multiple organs at the same time, which is very useful. So if something is really significant in the body, I will often do the reprint, and then on top of that, I'd use the bacterial research to go in and do the metatherapy for the pathogen. If I have got a long list of pathogens, I definitely wouldn't do that for all of them. I would do the inverse reprint for the majority and then just knock off the top 1 or 2 with the metatherapy, because I want to make the best use of my time. Anything else on that? Don't think so. So healing with the reprinter, you can use the organo preparations for the healing with the reprinter, and you can apply the therapies, so like the homeopathy, the litotherapy, the phytotherapy, and it's easy to find the elements of the body with the organo preparations, because sometimes I know that there's a problem in a certain area, but I can't find it on the diagram. And I think not everything is labelled and not everything is given an individual point on the system. So by using the reprinting for the organo preparations, that's one way of reaching lots of different areas, and I would definitely think that's very effective. But what's good with the metatherapy is that you can home in. So if you're looking at a broad area, so for example, on the organo preparations, it might just say liver. Well, that's quite a broad area. I would want to go in and maybe do extra nidus points, zoom in, look deeper, and really do a thorough session on that liver. So each one has its own benefits, and I use both for different reasons. Obviously, with the reprinting, you can create remedies, and I think the good thing about that is that you can use the energy regularly, where as opposed to doing the metatherapy regularly every day or every other day. It's not always convenient to have that person with you, and you know, it's something that's easy to do, but I don't think that reprinting energy replaces the metatherapy. It's just that they're two different tools. So both very effective. Okay, thank you, John. I hope that answers your question. Yes, so thank you very much, both of you, for those questions. And please, for anyone who wants to ask a question, write it in the comments or send me as a private message, can be anonymous. Also send me your success stories. I hope you've enjoyed this session, despite the interruptions. And please check out my website, which is www.theenergyroom.co.uk. Thank you very much. Hope to speak to you probably in a week's time. Thank you.